All right, so get this. Today's deep dive is going to take us right into the middle of the 2024 election.
Okay.
We're talking about something so under the radar. It might just be that October surprise nobody saw coming.
Really? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, picture this. It's a crisp fall day in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, just a few weeks from the election.
Right.
And the energy is just, well, you can cut it with a knife. People are fired up, yard signs are everywhere.
Yeah, I get it. Election season.
Right, but here's the thing. At a Kamala Harris rally, among all the blue, you see a bunch of Republicans.
Whoa, hold on, Republicans.
Yeah.
At a Harris rally, that's got to be a story.
And that's exactly what we're here to unpack today.
Okay.
I've got some really interesting excerpts from a new article in the Daily Beast.
Okay.
It's called Kamala's GOP Posse Predicts Hidden Harris's Victory. Catchy, right?
Yeah, I've seen that one making the rounds.
And we've also got some reports straight from the ground from Bucks County, of course. So our mission today is to figure out who these Republicans are, what's making them support Harris, and whether this whole thing could actually impact the election.
Sounds like we're diving into some potential cracks in the two-party system. I'm ready.
Me too. And we're not just talking about a few voters switching sides. This is some serious stuff.
Oh.
We're talking big names.
Yeah.
Like George Conway,
Conway. Okay.
the lawyer, staunch conservative, and husband to Kellyanne Conway.
Right, right. Can't be easy being married to someone with such different political views.
Tell me about it. But anyway, he's been a vocal critic of Trump for years now.
Yeah.
But to see him actually supporting the Democratic candidate, that's something else.
Wow, that really says something about how strongly he feels.
It does, and he's not the only one.
Really?
The article also talks about Olivia Troy. She was a national security official in the Trump White House.
Yeah, I remember her. She's been pretty critical of Trump, too.
Totally. And then there's Adam Kinzinger, the former Republican congressman who split from his party over Trump's actions.
Right, and Barbara Comstock, too, another former Republican rep who hasn't been shy about criticizing Trump.
You got it. So we've got some pretty influential Republicans here, all of whom have publicly broken with Trump.
Okay, so what's driving them to Harris specifically? Is it just that they're anti-Trump, or is there more to it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And to really get it, we need to dig deeper than the headlines and see what they're actually saying.
Makes sense.
The interesting thing is they're not just presenting this as being against Trump.
Oh.
They're framing it as a matter of principle, defending those core American values.
I see. So they're appealing to those traditional Republican values.
Exactly. They're saying that the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, of Reagan, has lost its way.
Okay.
And that Trump's whole style of politics is a danger to American democracy itself.
So it's less about them suddenly loving the Democrats and more about trying to reclaim what they see as true conservatism.
Exactly. They're tapping into this feeling among traditional Republicans. This feeling that the party doesn't represent their values anymore.
I can see that.
Especially when it comes to things like the rule of law, respecting democratic institutions, even just basic decency in politics.
Yeah, those feel like pretty universal values.
Right. It's like they're saying this is a fight for the soul of the Republican Party, and Harris, of all people, is their champion.
Republicans for Harris does have a ring to it.
They're calling it the hidden Harris vote. All these Republicans who they think are done with Trump and might actually cross party lines, especially if they see it as a vote to protect those values.
Hidden vote, huh? That's a powerful way to put it, but is there anything that suggests this is more than just, wishful thinking?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, because this isn't just coming from a few big names.
Oh.
The article goes into the experiences of people like Charisse Udell. She's a Harris volunteer who's been canvassing in Bucks County.
Bucks County. So they're actually seeing this on the ground.
That's right. And what Udell's seeing is fascinating.
Okay, it's listening.
On the surface, Bucks County looks like Trump country.
Right.
All the signs, all the talk.
Yeah, I can see that.
But as she talks to voters, she's starting to see this disconnect between what's out in the open and what's simmering underneath.
A disconnect. Okay, now you've got me hooked. What kind of disconnect are we talking about here?
She's running into all these Republicans who are telling her, that they just can't stand Trump's behavior and his policies.
Okay.
But they're afraid to say anything about it publicly.
Right.
Because they're worried about being judged or even ostracized by their families, their friends, their communities,
Yeah, that makes sense. It's tough to go against the grain like that, especially when it comes to politics.
It really is. And it makes you think about how we even measure public opinion these days.
Right.
Do traditional polls really capture the whole picture, especially now when things are so polarized?
Yeah, good point.
People might be hesitant to tell a pollster how they really feel, you know?
Totally. It's like that shy voter effect we always hear about.
Yes.
People not wanting to admit who they're actually going to vote for.
Mm.
But this goes even further than just being shy. This is about actual fear.
Oh, yeah.
Fear of judgment, of being isolated, even harassed for having different political views.
It's like this self-censorship thing that makes it almost impossible to know what voters are really thinking.
Exactly. And when you look at Bucks County specifically,
Right.
it gets even more interesting.
How so?
Well, on the surface, it's always seen as this Republican stronghold, right?
Yeah, that's the image anyway.
But when you look closer, it's way more complicated.
Sure.
Remember, Hillary Clinton barely won the county in 2016.
That's right.
And even though Trump did win it in 2020,
Yeah.
it was by a much smaller margin than his national win.
Okay.
Which tells us there are a significant number of voters there who are open to voting across party lines.
So going back to this whole hidden Harris vote idea, is it a real thing? Or is it just a bunch of anecdotal stories that don't really mean that much?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
Let's put on our political analyst hats for a second here.
Right.
What are the things we need to consider when we're trying to figure out the potential impact of this hidden vote?
Well, for one thing, we can't ignore the fact that just because a few Republicans in Bucks County tell a Harris volunteer they're voting for her,
Right.
that doesn't necessarily mean it's happening everywhere.
Exactly. Anecdotes are powerful, but they don't always reflect the bigger picture.
We have to be careful about reading too much into a small sample size.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, we can't ignore the historical context here either.
True.
We've seen this before in American politics, times when one party goes through a big shift,
Oh, yeah.
often because they feel like the party has moved too far away from its core values.
Like the Reagan Democrats in the 80s.
Exactly. A whole bunch of conservative Democrats switching over to the Republican Party.
So are you saying this Republicans for Harris thing could be a sign of something similar happening now?
It's definitely a possibility.
Wow.
I mean, when you have big-name conservatives like George Conway and Olivia Troy,
Yeah.
not just criticizing Trump, but actually campaigning for the Democrat,
Right.
it tells you there's something deeper going on here than just disagreeing on policy.
What do you mean?
They're talking about a threat to American democracy itself, a threat they think is bigger than any political party.
So you're saying this could be bigger than we realize, this hidden vote. I mean,
And it's possible, but how do you measure something like that? It's like you said, people are afraid to even tell a pollster who they're voting for.
right. So if we can't rely on the data.
Exactly. It's like trying to map a shadow, you know? It's there, but it's hard to pin down.
So what do we do? How do we even begin to understand the potential impact if we can't rely on the usual methods?
We have to get creative, look for clues in the margins, you know? Like, is the Harris campaign trying to appeal to these disaffected Republicans? Are they focusing on things like national unity or the rule of law? Things that might resonate with those voters.
That's a good point. I haven't really noticed that.
And on the other side, what about the Trump campaign? Are they doubling down on their base?
Like they're worried about losing those moderate Republicans.
Exactly. Are they ramping up the rhetoric, the policies that appeal to their core supporters? Those are the kinds of things that can tell us how seriously they're taking this hidden vote.
So we're looking for these subtle signs, these little hints that tell a bigger story.
Exactly. It's like a game of political chess. Each side trying to outmaneuver the other and win over these voters who might be up for grabs.
And it sounds like it's anyone's game at this point.
That's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
This election is shaping up to be one for the books, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And as we try to make sense of it all, keeping this hidden vote in mind is going to be key.
Because in a close election like this one, every vote counts.
Even the ones cast in the shadows?
Exactly.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But it's clear that there's a lot more to uncover when it comes to this hidden Harris vote.
Absolutely. This is something we'll definitely want to keep an eye on as we get closer to Election Day.
And for our listeners, keep your ears open for those subtle shifts, those whispers of discontent, those moments when it feels like the political landscape is shifting right beneath our feet.
Because sometimes the most important developments aren't the ones that make the headlines.
They're the ones that happen quietly, almost invisibly.
In the hearts and minds of voters who are just beginning to find their voice.
That's right. And who knows? Those voices just might decide the election.
You got it